Hi, everyone. It's Raghu. I'm back with starting to be an old friend. It seems like time has just sped through from when we first met. Annie Lamott. Annie, so great to have you here once again.
Thank you. So glad to be with you.
I Annie has a new book, okay, and it's called Dusk Night Dawn, which we're going to have to find out how you came up with that. But I just got to tell you, and I was going to do this off live, so to speak, but I have all kinds of, like all of us, stuff going on between everything, between COVID and what's going on politically and the environment, a lot of what you address in this book as well. And it's tough for everybody. So I start to read this book. Well, first of all, I didn't get the book. I'm telling everybody I didn't get the physical book, but you got me the PDF, and I'm like, oh God, I don't like reading PDFs, but I'm going to do it because it's Annie. And I started reading it. Probably the first time in a long time that I've read anything on my computer like that. And you changed my whole day last night, today, in the morning. People come, what are you laughing about? I'm like laughing out loud. Thank you. That's all I got to say, because it just turned some really tough stuff around.
You still didn't get a book?
No.
Oh, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I got mine last night, so.
Oh, you did?
Anyway, anyways, thank you for saying that. I hope people laugh. You know, I always say laughter is carbonated holiness, and I think once I'm laughing, I'm halfway home. Especially if I'm laughing about my own BS, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. All right, well, how did you come up? But the title is intriguing, Dusk Night Dawn.
I discovered at some point that twilight refers to both dusk, so before the light disappears into the night, and dawn, when the light returns. And that trippy mystical light, whether it's evening or dawn, is twilight. And I felt like in these last 4 years, and then especially after the UN climate change reports and Australia on fire, that it was really the nighttime of the soul. And so I thought dusk night, and now the dawn is broken again. The dawn always breaks, the sun always comes up again. So I wanted to write about all of those aspects without sugarcoating how difficult it's been, both with Trump and COVID and the devastation of the earth. That you can't, like Marianne Williams says, you can't pour pink paint over it all. That you go straight into it and you say, this is really scary. Mm. So where do we start?
Yeah. Where do we start?
Well, we start where our butts are, and we start off together. We start off in breathing and trying to remember to sit quietly and breathe, and then we talk to somebody else who might be having that same kind of anxiety, and we end up getting our senses of humor back, or remembering that all we have to do today is to help take care of the poor, and everything else will almost certainly resolve.
Mm. Or just the fact in that film that we did with Ram Dass called Becoming Nobody, and at one point he just says, well, when isn't enough? When is what you want enough? What I want enough? When is what I want need enough? A lot more interesting to go and see what you can do for somebody else.
Right. And then, whereas Jack Kornfield, our dear brother, said midway through COVID, and when it looked like Trump might be reelected, his daughter Caroline said, Daddy, if Trump wins, will you leave the country? And he said, no, I think I'll just stay. I'm too old. I think I'll stay here and help people into their lifeboats.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh boy. So we did this thing at the end of last summer, which was a retreat, an online retreat, as we're all. That's about it for all of us. Thank God for Zoom, though. I mean, look, I'm sitting here with you right now, and I wouldn't be had without this technology. So we had this wonderful weekend that you were a part of, and it was called Wise Hope, and it talked about resilience and coming from the right perspective around all of the issues that we're dealing with. And then you spoke the next day and hung out with everybody, and part of what you talked about was Dopey hope. You remember talking about Dopey hope? Well, we got a lot of Dopey hope that's gone on, okay?
That sounds right.
Let's talk about Dopey hope relative to what we were trying to get at that point in time, which was Roshi Joan Halifax, Wise Hope.
Right. Well, that was I guess that just seemed a little lofty for me because, I mean, she's a brilliant speaker and student and lecturer, and and I'm a Sunday school teacher, and so I don't. So Wise Hope is very, very beautiful, but I really was excited to hear all the other speakers talk about it, and I thought maybe I would cover the kind of more sitting on the couch with the kitty, Dopey hope of trusting that life has always seemed to pull us back up to our feet, it seems very, very hard now, but that we are good at hard. And this is something I'd remind my best friends or my Sunday school kids. We're good at hard. We stamped out fascism a couple times now. We stamped out smallpox. We came up with antiretrovirals, and so I feel like we just have to look at how many times before it's been the nighttime for both the planet and in our, at the dinner table. And what worked then? What worked then was kindness and just taking it one day at a time. And what we were just saying, that you get out of yourself, what Ram Dass was saying, that you get out of yourself and become a person for others, and you serve the poor. Usually if I don't have a clue what else to do, I just take care of the poor. I fill up boxes with really warm clothes right now, or I fill up a box with canned items, and I take it over to the Canal District where people are in extreme suffering with COVID and always with this grinding poverty. And I get thirsty people water, and sometimes that's just cranky old disappointing me. But when I first got sober, which is only almost 35 years ago, someone said to me, I was trying, I believe because I was raised by intellectuals that figuring things out is where it all begins. And that, that we worshipped the Church of the New York Times. And I learned that figure it out is really not a good slogan. And that what I heard almost 35 years ago was take the action and the insight will follow. And the insight is that there's just love, that, as Valerie Kaur would say, there's just revolutionary love. See no strangers. That's Kaur, if people haven't started reading her yet. And that you see everyone as a brother and a sister. And that if they're thirsty, you get them water.
Right.
So that's
Simple.
pretty dopey, but that's my understanding. And also another thing I was talking about, probably, because I usually am, is that you get outside and you look up. I always use that image of my pastor's image of the mason jar with no lid on it, with bees on the bottom, walking around bitterly, bumping into the glass walls of the jar because they just didn't look up. And if they looked up, they could fly away to freedom. And so I'm outside looking up a lot, and I'm coaching people to do the same. You don't look up and think, well, it's a medium new moon tonight, it's an okay full moon. You wake up and you say, wow. And that wow is like being spritzed with a plant mister, and it wakes you back up again. And that's really all we can do day to day and hour by hour, is wake up again and again and again and say, wow, the great praise prayer.
Yeah. Wow, he's right. You talk. There's a lot here about courage, and I don't know if this story. You may have heard this at one of those retreats in Maui from Krishna Das, because it's something that he experienced, and I have told it and retold it because to me it's so core to being able to even look up. It's core to that courage. And so Krishnadas was in a hotel room in Mumbai, a long time back with Neem Karoli Baba, with Maharaji, and who was there with an Indian man who was translating and all of that, an old-time devotee. And suddenly Maharaji turned to Krishnadas and he went, courage is a very important thing. And the Indian man who was the translator, an old-time devotee, he said, well, wait, Maharaji, this is bhakti yoga. This is the guru kripa, the grace of the guru. There's no, it's like implying you don't need anything. There's no need for courage, no need for. So Maharaji looked directly at Krishnadas again and went, courage is a very, precious, important thing. Krishnadas had that he's had that all his life. And in every circumstance, this is fortunate for him personally, that has come into his consciousness when he's been in these moments when we cannot look up or we feel we are so stuck. And that is the moment that has allowed him to look up. And so courage, yes, talk a little bit about it, Annie.
Well, that's the subtitle of Dusk Night Dawn is on courage and revival. Because I really started out to write a book about revival because on the last book, which I believe was on hope, I think I should have it here like a normal writer, but I believe it was called Almost Everything, Thoughts on Hope or something like that. And Neil would know. But anyway, everywhere I went on that book tour, people were deflated and defeated by the years of barbarity and ignorance, and then by the arrival, the first word of COVID, I guess, but then also the UN climate change report. And so I was thinking in my own life about revival, how do we fill back up when we've lost so much sand from our burlap sacks? Where do we begin? We always begin where your butt is, It's the only place you really can begin. Because where your butt is, your heart is too. I think that's in the New Testament. And how do we fill up? We fill up through love. We fill up through loving service. We fill up through loving awareness. We fill up through nutrition. There's many kinds of food. I read a lot of poetry. I call a best friend and I just tell the truth. I say, I just hate everyone today, and I hate all of life, and I'm just going to go to Safeway and get a carrot cake. The great Safeway carrot cake does not have one actual ingredient found in nature. Makes it so special.
Yeah.
And the friend will say, oh, I'm so glad you called me too. You're the only person I like besides the kitty. And then we'll start to laugh, and then we'll start to fill up on laughter, on love, and on truth. There's a great acronym in the recovery movement for FEAR, which is the frantic effort to appear recovered and to look like you're doing really beautifully and that you have a very, very elevated spiritual plan and program, which is in effect almost all the time. And so to tell the truth is how we felt. So I started telling stories about being really defeated and deflated at the bottom, both in my own life and with really dear friends who've just gone through it. And what do we see in the common well of elevation and revival? Well, we see people like Dale Borglum. I forgot his Hindu name. What is it? Deva?
Ramdev.
Ramdev, who's doing the Living Dying
Yeah.
Project. My best friend's child just died, the
Oh.
Mason I wrote about so much, and I wrote about Janine in my book, and
Mm.
it had been expected. But Ramdev was with him for 2 years, and I was always with Mason, the boy who died, and he said about Dale, he said, "Oh, it's like having the greatest friend on earth."
Mm.
Dale would show up and he'd be in truth with him. He wouldn't be handing out like nice Christian bumper stickers that God never gives you more than you can handle.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, really? Thank you for sharing. Did God stop by this morning and give you the memo? And instead, Dale would show up and he'd say, "Yeah, it makes sense that you're scared." And Mason would say, "I'm dying, Dale," and Dale would say, "I'm dying too. Wow. Let's just be in that together. I'm so happy to see your face." And then Mason would cry and say, "I'm so happy you're here with me. Thank you. Thank you." It's scary, right? To be with a young person who's dying. So, anyway, that's in the common well now. And stories of my friend in prison for running over somebody when she
Yeah.
was
That
drunk.
was, oh
Where do
my,
you
my.
start when you've killed someone drunk? You start where your butt
Oh.
is. You start where your heart is. You start with telling the truth. You start with understanding you can never make it up to the victim's family, and that you're not in charge of making it up to the victim's family. You're in charge of your union with God and with goodness and with truth and with trying to save whoever else you can now, and trying to get sober and trying to get right with God. And so I had all these stories, and I think you and I have talked about this over the years, but that great line of Barry Lopez is that sometimes we need a story more than we need food. And so I started
Mm.
telling stories of revival and renewal and courage. And, the courage of someone in prison for killing somebody drunk who finally says the words out loud to another prisoner and to her own mother, "I may be an alcoholic." And the prisoners cheer, and they take her to her first meeting. And she hasn't had a drink in 3 years, and she becomes part of the California Conservation Corps, where she's helping remove the brambles and the brush that is contributing to the fires in California. And so she can't save the family of the victim. She can do anything she can think of, but she can also save other families. She can help save the earth. We do what's possible,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, that's quite a story of that woman who had that one moment in her life that just totally altered everything for her
For her and for a number of
and
people,
for a
for her
number
own
of people.
family.
Yeah.
She basically brought down with her and spent $100,000 getting only 4 years in prison. And the family of the young man whose motorcycle she hit, or forgot, no, he was a pedestrian. I know someone else who hit somebody on a motorcycle. And it's pretty hard stuff to live with, but as we started out saying, we're good at heart. You just need the right companion, and you push back your sleeves, and they say, like Dale Borglum says, with his Living Dying People, "It's good to see you today. I'm glad to be with you." When maybe other people aren't so glad to see you, someone else says, "I am."
Yeah.
And that's maybe where a lot of the courage starts.
Yeah. Yeah. Right there. Beautifully said. And you also say in the book, this one, to me, really important, a bit of a double-edged sword, actually, but stories can be our most reliable medicine. I love that. And, of course, there's also the stories that we tell ourselves and believe in that is not reliable medicine.
That we make up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's where all of my mental problems come from, are the stories that I make up, usually about other people and and how they're to blame, and how their behavior should be straightened out in an appropriate way, which I will discuss further. And then after which I think we'll all be more comfortable, and I'm glad to see them. And as soon as I realize I'm doing it again, that awareness of it, there's the 3 A's. There's the awareness, the acceptance, and the action. The awareness is, I'm doing it again. I've made up this story about really how unworthy somebody or disappointing somebody else is. And I'm doing it. And the acceptance is, of course, I'm doing it. I was raised doing it. My parents did it. We did this as a family. My parents couldn't stand Christians. My parents couldn't stand Barry Goldwater, and it made us feel better than, right? I accept it. It's also part of my comfort zone, is believing other people are the source of my unhappiness. It's it's how I self-medicate. So I accept it. Whatever. It's fine. Yes, I'm doing it again. And the action for me, because I usually at that point I'm separated from God, I'm separated from myself, I'm separated from the umbilical flow of life and to the divine, is to do some sort of radical self-care. To go get myself a cup of tea, to go get myself a fun-sized pack of M&Ms, or, to get in bed with a kitty and a good book, and to call off the rest of the day, or to get the new issue of People magazine, and the Safeway carrot cake, whatever or to call someone and to say those magic words, do you have a minute? And if I called you, Raghu, no matter what you were doing, no matter what you had on your docket, if I said, Raghu, do you have a minute? You'd say, yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story, Annie. We're putting together a book at the foundation called The Remarkable Heart of Ram Dass, just people's stories about him. And there was one, it was either, I think Sharon Salzberg. Mm-hmm. She said, one time I was visiting him, and he said, I am not answering my phone because I'm really exhausted. I've been on one tour after another. I've been working with people who are dying. All the things that he did. So they sat down and they were just chatting. Suddenly the phone rang and he looked. Everybody looked at him because he had just said this. He could not take that call. Yeah. That somebody needed his help. Yeah. And that's again, to me, that's one of the most core examples of a great human being that he expressed, which is he could not share this stuff. He could not take that call. And he actually said it to me, and I've said this a billion times as well. I said, well, why did you come back from India after meeting this extraordinary being who told you, don't talk about me in America, and that's all you did? What were you doing? And this is just a few years ago. And he said, I had a jewel. I could not share it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah, me too.
Annie, do you mind if I want to read something, which is the delight. It made me so, it was so fun. It was so real. It was so delightful. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe I don't know, because this is Annie's personal relationship with her new husband, fairly new. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. She put it in the book. I think I can read it. All right. Definitely. So if you don't mind.
Not at all.
So this is a little bit in the middle of something you were talking about, but I blurted out my grievances, all the secret ways I judge him, meaning Neil, Annie's husband. All the ways I judge me for judging him. Also, that he acts very superior sometimes for such a spiritually evolved man. Also, when we were at it, that he locks the bathroom door when he does his morning toilette. I listen to his electric toothbrush and shaver in the shower, wondering, why would he lock out his perfectly nice new wife? Maybe he was shooting heroin in there. I love those random thoughts. And this guy thing, not specific to him, but he never wipes his glasses when they're all smudged. How can he see through the lenses when they're like a motorcycle windscreen after a ride through the desert? He doesn't wear sunscreen and likes to get a tan, even though my father died of melanoma, so it's very triggering for me. Also, when we have an argument and I am explaining my position, he tilts his head in a domineering male way. I don't know how many times I've been accused of this, by the way. And if you read between the lines, you can tell he's thinking, you can't possibly think that like that, because it's so stupid that if you actually thought it, people would have to kill you. and he puts butter in absolutely everything, although it's fattening, and oh my God.
He cooks rice with butter, and then he puts butter on top of the rice when he serves it. I swear I must be a saint.
Boy, oh boy. So you use, this is a bit of a theme throughout the book, actually.
My sainthood, or how annoying he can be.
Yeah, the back and forth that takes place. It's so great. I like this other, but you're just a champion of coming up with these incredible phrases that say so much. There's at one point you're talking about, all the things that put a yucky varnish, shall we say, on our souls. And so you talk about needing soul Windex, and I thought, that is a perfect analogy. Soul Windex, right?
Yeah, well, I believe with every ounce of my being that the soul is eternal and is within and really can't in any way be damaged or destroyed. But it does seem to me like a windshield on a car, that it gets smudged by the constant data stream and what we were talking about, the crazy thoughts you think usually about other people's behavior or disappointment in yourself or whatever, and they get smudged. So how do we clean them? And really that's what we've been talking about here today. We clean them with truth, we clean them with humor, we clean them with stories and poetry, and we clean them by getting back outside again, getting into nature and letting ourselves be available for me to be cleaned.
Yeah. And at some point, we always, as we talk, we always have this overlay of what we have been through here in the last year, in the last 4 years, and so on. And look, you and I are sitting here. We live in California, both of us. What's going on and east of us is very, very difficult to even ponder. It's a nightmare.
Literally heartbreaking. It breaks your heart, but it breaks your heart open, right? And that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Carly Simon said there's more room in a broken heart. And it breaks your heart open, and you do what is possible for either of us to do today. Well, we can send money to the Red Cross. We can send money to people that are getting fresh water. They have to boil their water now, but they don't have power, and sometimes they don't have gas because the pipes are frozen. So what do? We do what we can. We get them water, we get them warm meals, we get the sick people medicine. But we can't get to Texas, so we send money and we say, tell me how I can help. Whatever you need, I'm in.
Yeah. And you talk about this, and I'll just reference it in terms of what's going on, and it leads to certainly a lot of lost faith, lost trust, and it can be debilitating, especially if you don't really maybe have that person to call. Do you have a moment? And you bring this up. Where on earth can we begin to recover our faith in life in the midst of so much bad news and dread, when our children's futures are so uncertain? And you say we start in the here and now. That's why they call it the present. We start where our butts and feet and minds are. We start in these times of incomprehensible scientific predictions, madness and disbelief, aging and constantly nightmarish airport delays. Those aren't happening much anymore, at least not for me. And we look up and around for brighter ribbons. It is so difficult for so many people to be able to find that little kernel of trust and a little bit of wise and dopey hope combined together. I think that they're part of one circle. And I've talked about this a lot, when we would be in Maui. I mean, trust for me was one of the most important ingredients in being able to keep on trucking, especially with what's going on now. And what does that mean? And what does that look like for you? Trust.
Well, I'll be 67 next month, and am I older than you?
No, you are not. I am older than you, and you don't look anything like that.
We're very sweet.
67.
67. Yeah, I got Medicare 3 days before my wedding.
Not bad.
Yeah. The trust for me, I'm 67, and I'd say I began to have a very, very deep trust in life about 20 years ago. And I think it's really a very long road back from a childhood that was very frightening because there was an unhappy marriage. My parents were very unhappy. My dad drank a lot. My mother was hugely overweight and had an eating disorder and black belt codependence, and I got teased a lot and bullied a lot because I had very, very strange and different looks. I didn't know I was beautiful, and I learned to work around trust. I wrote a book. Now I won't remember it either. It might have been Hallelujah anyway, the Mercy book.
Yeah, we talked about that book.
Yeah. And it was about how by kindergarten or first grade, you've put away a lot of the stuff that you came blessed with, which is mercy. That you go to, kids can be beasts, but they also will give away everything you give them, and that you want them to keep, i.e. if you're a mother or grandparent, you make them lunch, you want them to eat it, and they give it away because someone has a bad lunch or they spaced out and they left it on the bus or whatever. And the kids give away everything. And by about first grade, when you're really on the blacktop with the big kids, you stop putting away that natural compassion and mercy because it doesn't really serve you. And your parents tell you not to do it. And your teachers tell you not to do it. And it starts being a thing that you do better than others. You start to understand that you really want to be the best, not to plagiarize Melania and be best, but you have to find the line between being best but also not alienating anyone because you're smarter than or whatever. You're better at math and science than the boys. You're 50s you weren't allowed to be better than the boys. And so I put the mercy and I put the trust in the drawer. And originally Hallelujah anyway, which is the name of a gospel song, was called The Open Drawer because it was about going to the drawer and getting it out. And kids have that kind of excruciating, lovely, heartbreaking trust that grown-ups will care for them. And a lot of the grown-ups had this kind of caffeinated neglect because they had so much to do and they were struggling to get ahead, and they wanted people to be they wanted to have lives that other people were envious of. That was kind of, I think, the game. And so you were either neglected, or there was a lot of shame in my childhood and in the childhood of every girl who grew up to be a woman I know, because their bodies weren't the right bodies, or their hair wasn't thick enough, or in my case was just crazy kinky ringlets, or that you developed too late or you developed too early. What an even worse nightmare. And so you just developed this shame, the acronym of shame is should have already mastered everything, and you're eventually a teenager and you haven't mastered everything, and you're in your 20s and you haven't mastered anything, and you're in your 40s and you haven't mastered anything or everything. But in your 40s, you start to realize that you have been trying to do something impossible, which was to master everything. And so you start throwing out a lot of stuff and obsessions and concerns that were keeping your airplane flying way too low for those first 35 years. And you stop caring as much about what you look like, what your thighs look like, or your tummy or whatever, and you think, wow, my tummy is so welcoming, and people seem to really like to rest their head on it, and you get rid of so much stuff. Like you start throwing out files, or like in my early 40s, I called the San Francisco Public Library and I said, could you send a van over the weekend? And I got rid of hundreds of books that I had always moved with and set up in my bookshelves so that people would see that I had read them, and that I was sure I don't have much of an education, but that people could see how smart I am to have read these fancy books. I'm never going to read them again. Or people had given them to me. I either had read them or hadn't, or never was going to. I gave away hundreds of books to the friends of the San Francisco Public Library. And so when you start lightening by getting rid of obsessions, stories about yourself, papers you've collected, and whatever, then you start to get your trust that what is left, what remains. Often people have to get terminal illness to get rid of so much BS. And maybe there's a way, to lighten through forgiveness, through other kinds of release, to see what is left when a lot of the persona and the what's it called in Hollywood, when you have a false front, whatever, on a movie set where you have a false front, you start getting rid of that stuff, and you're kind of sitting there and you're suddenly a Samuel Beckett character, but the grace in Waiting for Godot is that in the very beginning there's a branch with no leaves on it, and at the end of the third act there's several little bright green leaves on the tree, and maybe you start to see how profound and extraordinary that is, those 3 green leaves, and you start to see that your own true self, without the false fronts and without the persona and without the finery, in which you never really felt that fine because it's actually always going to be an inside job, is enough and is very touching and has been turned into a font or a little campfire for other people to come warm their hands on, because you've gotten rid of so much that was not really your idea to begin with. So that is where my trust came from, was the being, I always had these sort of birth coaches and doulas, whether they were therapists or my teachers and my sponsors, who helped me give up, release, hand it over, let me take it for you for a while. If you want it back, I'll give it back. And so that's where trust came, that I actually was, that I became a reliable person. I became a trustworthy person. I wasn't making up stories all the time to impress you or to make you see how utterly victimized I have been and thus deserving of your love. And it was a process. And I was talking to somebody who's had terminal cancer, 4th stage. She's 40 years old with a 7-year-old, and she turned 40 yesterday on Ash Wednesday. And I said, oh, you're going to love your 40s. You're going to love your 40s, because you're going to do the work that life asks you or helps you or offers you the chance to do, of this lightening and this release, where one day at a time, on any given day, you're going to be lifted, you're going to be pulled back to your feet, you're going to be nourished, you're going to be noticed, and you're going to be delighted in, one day at a time, starting on your 40th birthday. That's my belief.
Yeah, wow. And you speak of this little in the book, which is, I can't think of anything else I so totally related with regarding my earlier part of my life, and that is that you had a governess growing up, and that governess was called dread.
Yeah.
right? And you say, she kept me alive. I didn't run out into the street, didn't talk to strangers, didn't sass, wipe front to back, minded my manners and teachers, stayed on my toes, did well in school. Uh, let me see where, I just wanted to read this part. My parents did not hire her to keep me small and obedient, to keep me separate from all of you and all of life and most of me. I hired her. I was 3 or 4. She was my most reliable companion, always there for me, like God in a bad mood. Dread taught me how to succeed and why it mattered, how to survive the caffeinated neglect you just talked about of my home life, the bullying on the blacktop, the equally fraught states of isolation and intimacy. She kept me in line, helped me to be someone everyone would like. She got me where I am to where I am today. Every one of us has had that governess, I would say, in one way or another. I mean, of course, the way you put things so wonderfully, the metaphors and so on that are capture the essence. But I would say, wouldn't you say, we all have had, because I looked at this and went, yeah, I had that governess, absolutely. And I can't think of anybody that I know, all the people I was in India with and all that stuff, they all have that governess. And it's not like it doesn't completely 100% go away. You carry it through in different aspects and believe in it. It's that place where you go back to believing in that BS, in those thoughts and so on and so forth.
Well, I've been really blessed by Neil's work. He has a website called Shapes of Truth and a book coming out called Shapes of Truth too, and it's a lot about it's a lot about the diamond heart approach and the stories that we make up about ourselves, but it's also about all the ways in which we stay small as part of the contract we sign both to the culture and to our parents, to stay small and afraid and sort of disappointed or ashamed of who we've been to other people in our lives, and it is all a kind of misguided attempt to keep us alive. The child's equivalent that you just read is that we didn't run out into the street, right? But the adult equivalent would be that we don't fly, we don't leave our comfort zones and try wild new things. I mean, for me, this is kind of tooting my own horn, but at the age of 62, to fall in love with a man who was 61, who was violently allergic to cats, which means that
yeah, that's crazy.
we could be in the same house together, was really terrifying. But because the dread has gotten so much less dominant in my consciousness, I was able one day at a time to tiptoe into trying this brand new bold experiment in loving a healthy and available man. And the work at Shapes of Truth is to identify the governess. Well, it's my term, governess. He would use superego. And he helps people bring the superego forth, and so you can just talk on Zoom with your superego. But for me and for Neil in the superego work, to help find other projects for the governess to work on besides you, your own self. So that one thing Neil and I came up with was we could say to this governess how grateful we are that she's kept us alive, but that we right now we think we're probably okay on our own, but that maybe she could go be in the library or the study and be a kind of an ethical consultant for us. And so that whenever we needed an ethical consultant, we would go get the governess and be able to mine her great understanding of life, fear-based, but and good manners-based. But otherwise, we thought we might be okay for now to make our own decisions and to follow our own dreams. So. And
intuition, yeah. Just back to the talking about trust. I just keep thinking about it and thinking about you. So is that person you can call? Do you have a moment? And that whole action, that taking of that action, the receptivity on the other side is to me grace. That's how I would put that. But there's something you say. I thought I was nuts and pathetic. At one point in your life, you're talking about, and then friends said that my soul was fine inside the rubble. They would help me clear it away. That's what trust is. You understand that is all available and possible in most everyone in our lives. Yes, there may be some people who are so abused and so separated from any kind of awareness of that possibility, but most of us have that, right? And that's what yes, they will help clear that rubble. That's what we call, from the Hindu thing, satsang and community, basically.
Well, Henry Nouwen, the great French Jesuit who ends up at Harvard, also like Ramdas, he left it all, left the fame and the Harvard and the bestseller list, and he went to live in a little community of severely developmentally disabled people. And for the rest of his life, for 20 years, he took care of a man who could never say one word to him. And he called that the beloved community. I believe Martin Luther King called it the precious community, right? But it's the field of trusted souls right around you to whom you can say anything. And you might have to preface it by, can I tell you a secret? Can I tell you something very scary about myself? And in that, if a community is one other person, and for me, it seems so daunting, that's the word, when you kind of wake up and you're in the rubble. But it's really like pickup sticks, where there's a few easy things on the periphery that you can pick up right away, right? You don't risk the whole pile tumbling back to the ground. You can pick up some of the pickup sticks really easily, and some not quite as easily, but you can do it. And so you start there. You don't start, who was it who said, maybe it was Ramdas, maybe it was Marianne Williamson. I have no idea. But somebody said, when you remember that life is forgiveness school and that your life is going to be about forgiveness, you maybe don't start with a Gestapo,
Yeah.
You maybe start with your cousin who always says this thing that really drives you crazy, so that you hardened your heart against him.
Yeah, Cousin Ernie.
Yeah, cousin Ernie. You start with Ernie. And so, you start where you are and you start where you can. So, and if you listening to this thought that you don't have a precious community, a beloved and trusted community who you will help develop their trust muscles again, then you ask yourself why, why is not usually a very useful question, and figure it out is never a good mantra, but you become aware of it. You've become aware that for whatever reasons, probably fear and a lot of different fear and grief and anger, which are those are the three ways home, right? You and I have talked about this in other mind rolling things, and in our that grief, we run screaming from the grief, the anger, especially if you're a woman, and the fear, because they're not hip, slick, and cool, and they don't make you look like you have a very elevated spiritual program, or that the Dalai Lama will want to come for lunch next week. But that's where you go straight into them. And if you, because of them, have found yourself without someone to call and ask if they have a minute, then you say, this is very good information to have. And I am going to start right here, and I am going to find one person, and it could be one writer, could be one book, could be one podcast, could be one episode of Mindrolling, it could be one Jack Cornfield guided meditation, it could be one thing where you start and you push back your sleeves and you say, okay, I'm in. And then God, 100% of the time, if you seek your precious community, 100% of the time, the phone is going to ring, the email is going to come, or you're going to end up at the park with your dogs with somebody who forgot a mask, and you give them yours, and you use your bandana for a mask, or whatever it happens to look like. There will be a person who says hello, or thank you, or wow, that was really sweet of you. And all of a sudden, not only is your mind rolling, but the ball's rolling now. And if, I always believe that if I get what I pray for, I'm shortchanging myself. Or if I get what I want, I'm shortchanging myself. If I get what God wants, check back with me and Raghu in 6 months, and there will be people surrounding you who are there for you, who you meet with or you Zoom with, and you have a cup of tea with, who laugh when you share your foibles and these incredible stories you've made up about yourself, and who have said, "Oh yeah, me too, I've done it, whatever," and and then you're home free.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Welcome home.
Yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful. That is the truth. We're close to the end of our hour, but I have to mention this one thing, and not to get, it's a chapter in the book. It's called Repentability, and only you could come up with that phrase, and it's about excelling during tragedies and bringing our best selves to serve the suffering. I'm reading in the book. In a devastated world, nation, community, family, we keep each other company when children or pets are missing, when our last auntie or old dog dies. This, of course, and you've centrally have been speaking to this very, very question in this time, in the times that we are living in, and I think it's just a absolutely elementally important thing that. Just look around. You just described a situation where you will be able to find that one thing, and you have enough of gumption and courage to listen to the podcast, get the book, do whatever comes to you that is grace, and act on it. And then the other thing, and that's why I love this, that's in the book, is we are absolutely repentable. We are. And it's easy to see just looking in these times at just walking down the street where everybody's in the same boat, and just that one glance. Oh yes. Okay. We're here together, and good morning.
Mm-hmm. We are as vulnerable as kittens, but we have each other. And that's usually enough for me most days. But to repent means you change directions, you change course. It doesn't mean what a right-wing Christian would say. It means that you understand that if you keep going in the direction you're heading, you're going to end up, you're going to end up somewhere that really might not have anything to do with your heart or your soul or your breath or your what did Ram Dass call it? Your heart cave, your the love energy. And so you maybe change directions. But I'll just close. I love this image. I think every single time you've asked me to speak, I've ended up using it. But there was this guy, and my mind has gone blank, but who helped Bill Wilson get AA started in 1935. He was a priest, but he was not an alcoholic. And he said to Bill Wilson, "Sometimes I think that heaven is just a new pair of glasses." And so, I wake up sometimes, and God, especially before January 20th, and I would just have like the smudged glass, I'd have the bad glasses on, where I'm feeling restless, irritable, discontent, and I want things to change. I can't be in acceptance. It's just blah, blah, blah. And then I realize I have the bad glasses on. I'm feeling victimized. I'm feeling self-righteous. You got a problem. You probably got to go look in the mirror. It's not them, Usually it's the bad glasses that we've got on with which we're looking at them. And so as a conscious act of loving awareness, of radical self-care, we take off the bad glasses and we put on the good glasses and we look around for signs of God. And I make my little kids do this all the time in Sunday school. We have these God walks and we look around and you might see a bluebell, which is like a quarter of an inch blue flower. And you look for that and you go, wow, that is so delicate in that blue. You can't recreate it with art. I mean, that is only God at her most show-off, And then you look around and you do faith walks. We cover each other's eyes with kerchiefs and we lead one another around into the fresh air or into the mist if it's a foggy morning here. And we know that we can trust that person whose hand we're holding to lead us around safely and keep us from bumping into poles, And so you do you put on the good pair of glasses and you look for God, you look for goodness, you look for good orderly direction. Grace is, spiritual WD-40. You look around at all your neighbors who have come through this catastrophe of virus and ill management and bad will, and we are still loving each other, we're shopping for each other, we're stopping, we're wearing our masks, we're standing 10 feet away, we're putting blessing on each other, and we're doing just beautifully, one day at a time, together.
Yeah. And it's repentability is inimic to who we are and our relationship with the divine, in my mind. And by the way, I can't leave without, because we talk so much about trust. Okay, here's something, and you say this, we'll end with this. Here's something that cannot be trusted at all. And that's the mind. And you say here, my mind, not always to be trusted. And it's for entertainment purposes. If you kind of look at it that way.
It's like an arcade.
Yeah. You'll get we will get a little bit more spacious around the, oh my God, this is real. And that every thought that's come out of my head that I wouldn't want anyone to see. Is not to be trusted.
I know. Well, you'll see me sometimes with a rubber band around my wrist, and I snap it very, very gently because we get addicted to that thinking too, and to the pinball machine of the mind. It's our comfort zone. But when I'm done, when the willingness to comes from the pain, and I'll gently snap a rubber band. Spritzes me back away, out of my mind, into my heart, and then I can breathe again, and then I am umbilically connected to the divine through you, through nature, through my animals, So
yeah.
You have to break the trance, so yeah.
I may have to dump my rosary, my mala, and get that rubber band because maybe a little bit of a snap is a
gentle
good thing.
Snap.
Oh, it's a gentle snap. Okay, well, I can be a little rough. So
it will spritz you back to the love energy of the here and now.
Yes. Thank you so much, Annie. I love hanging out with you. You are so dear, and everybody. Of course, we're going to have everything you all need to order the book. All right, so don't worry for a moment, and we might even put a couple of other books in there. Annie has quite a number. This one's called Dusk Night Dawn, okay? And whatever else, we have links. We have Annie at different retreats, and we've got all kinds of wonderful stuff that I'm sure they'll find and share. And, yeah. We'll see.
Thank you. I love you, Raghu.
I love you too, Annie. We shall see you all. This is Mindrolling on the Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and you will be able to listen and share these wonderful words of wisdom from Annie and my friends. And we've talked about Jack Cornfield. Of course, Jack is there as well. And Ram Dass and Krishna Das and Sharon and Joseph. Yeah. So we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.